I didn't think parking an old car in an extra space would start a war. It wasn't in anyone's way. It wasn't an eyesore. It wasn't even near the townhomes, just sitting quietly in one of the unused community parking spots near the far edge of the lot. Out of sight, out of mind. But then came the letter, not addressed to me, to my brother-in-law who owned the townhouse I was staying in. The violation? My car was unregistered. Only it wasn't. It was still legally registered, just in another state. It had a valid plate, valid tags, and I even had a printed copy of the registration in the glove box, but the license plate wasn't visible. Why? Because the car was under a cover. A standard weather-resistant $40 car cover I bought online, which meant someone didn't just see the plate wasn't visible, someone had lifted the cover. That was the moment everything changed, because that meant this wasn't about rules anymore. This was personal. We already knew there was a board member who walked the property daily, clipboard in hand like she was running a military inspection, but I hadn't expected her to go so far as to start touching other people's cars. Mine wasn't even near the homes. She would have had to walk behind the units and lift the cover intentionally. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't even remove the cover. But my brother-in-law? He was furious. He showed up to the next HOA meeting, letter in hand, and said one thing. Just so we're clear, I'll be filing a police report in case whoever lifted that car cover also damaged the vehicle. They went quiet. He wasn't actually going to file a report, but he wanted it on record that someone had touched private property without permission. We thought that would be the end of it, but instead, the board doubled down. A week later, they passed a new rule. All vehicles parked in community spaces, not garages or driveways, had to be moved every 24 hours. No warning, no community vote. Just passed it and posted it. 17 empty spaces in the lot, only one car being used that way. And they sent the first warning letter and only warning letter to us. That's when we knew this wasn't about a car anymore. It was a campaign, and they picked the wrong person to play games with. The neighborhood itself was peaceful, or at least it looked that way from the outside. Townhomes lined both sides of the street, all uniform in color, shape, and style. Rows of perfectly trimmed shrubs, a few garden flags, a lot of rules. But most of the residents kept to themselves. They waved when they saw you. Quiet, polite, predictable. My sister and her husband had lived there for a few years before I moved in with them temporarily. It was supposed to be short-term. I'd taken a new job nearby and was getting settled, until I found a place of my own. I kept things simple. Didn't throw parties, didn't blast music, didn't even park close to the unit. I had a new car for work, and the old one, which I still legally owned and drove, I parked way out in the community lot. No one used those spots. Most of them sat empty week after week, but that didn't matter to the board, or more specifically, to the board member who treated the HOA like her personal police department. Every day she did a walk of the property. It wasn't in the bylaws. No one voted for it. She just decided it was her role to inspect, literally inspect, every unit, not just the front yards, not just the streets. She walked behind homes, down alleys, around garages, and behind the back patios. It was all under the excuse of maintaining standards, but it didn't feel like that. It felt like surveillance, like someone waiting to catch you out of bounds, even if they had to trespass to do it. Everyone in the neighborhood knew who she was, the one who always held the clipboard, the one who paused in front of your property for too long, the one who once measured a neighbor's patio potted plant with a tape measure. That's not an exaggeration. It actually happened. People talked, but no one pushed back. That changed when she touched my car. There were no complaints, no warnings, no conversation, just a letter claiming my car was unregistered, and it wasn't even sent to me. It went straight to my brother-in-law, even though the board had been told I was living there. It was petty, but also invasive. It wasn't enough to just notice my car. Someone had to walk through the parking area, pull at the car cover, look under it, and then report what they saw. And that's when my brother-in-law decided to show up at the next meeting. He wasn't loud. He wasn't emotional. He just held up the violation letter, looked around the room and asked, "Before I file a police report for potential vehicle tampering, could someone please tell me who uncovered my car without consent?" They said nothing. Few of them looked uncomfortable. The one who had likely done it, the daily inspector, avoided eye contact. That should have been the end of it. But of course, with people like that, it never is. Instead of backing off, they created a rule designed to catch us again. A new policy. All community-parked vehicles must be moved every 24 hours or face a fine. It was so specific, so sudden and so clearly targeted, it would have been laughable if it weren't real. And even then, we still tried to play fair. But playing fair only works when the other side does too. It didn't take long after the rule passed for the first letter to arrive. Same envelope, same tone. This time it was a formal violation notice. Failure to move a vehicle parked in the community lot within the new 24-hour limit. The kicker? We were the only ones who got it. There were still over a dozen cars parked out there regularly. Some hadn't moved in weeks, but the only one the board decided to fine was mine. No warnings, no questions, just a penalty. At first, my brother-in-law laughed. "They're digging their own hole," he said. But the more he thought about it, the angrier he got. Not because of the fine itself, but because it was so obviously personal. We'd followed every rule before this. We'd kept quiet, paid dues, didn't make noise. This wasn't about community standards anymore. It was about retaliation, and we weren't about to let that slide. At the next HOA meeting, my brother-in-law showed up again. Calm, confident, the letter in hand. He addressed the board directly. "I'm happy to pay the fine," he said, "as soon as you provide the 24-hour surveillance video showing the vehicle didn't move." They stared at him. "No video," he continued. "Okay, then maybe you have a written log. Names, times, board members who witnessed the vehicle sitting still all day, every day?" Silence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just smiled and said, "If there's no video and no witnesses, then how do you know the vehicle didn't move?" They didn't have an answer because they couldn't produce one. They'd written a rule and then enforced it against one person with zero evidence. And to make it even clearer we weren't going to back down, I made a point of moving the car every single day. Sometimes I'd drive around the block. Sometimes I'd pull into a different space. Sometimes I'd just reverse it. Head in one day, backed in the next. And still we kept getting warnings. They said we were not complying with the spirit of the rule. What does that even mean? I was moving the car every single day, just like they said. No more, no less. Then I started switching between parking spots, left one day, right the next. Kept them guessing. Still not enough. That's when my brother-in-law's patience finally ran out. He wasn't going to argue anymore. He was going to make a point, a very loud, very public point. It started with one drive-by. Just after sunset, my brother-in-law got in my old car, started it up, and drove it slowly through the neighborhood. Not unusual, until he turned onto the street where one of the board members lived and honked the horn. Just once, a sharp, clean beep. Then he drove to the next board member's house. Same thing. One honk, then the next. 3 stops, 3 honks. The next night, he did it again, and the next, and the next. Every evening, around the same time, he'd take the car on a little tour past every board member's house. Honk once, drive on. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't making noise beyond a single horn tap. He didn't stop, didn't shout, didn't step out of the car. But he made one thing perfectly clear. This vehicle has been moved. The reactions were everything you'd expect. Curtains parted, porch lights turned on. Some board members stepped outside trying to act casual. One waved awkwardly. Another stood by the curb like she was preparing to issue a citation herself. But none of them said a word, not directly. Instead, a week into the routine, we received another letter. This one didn't have a fine attached. No threats, no accusations, just a request. Please stop driving the vehicle through the neighborhood and honking, that was it. No mention of any rule violation, no mention of parking. Just a plea to make it stop. So my brother-in-law had his lawyer respond. Nothing formal, just a polite letter that clarified the following. The car was legally registered. It was being moved daily, as per the new rule. All activity was occurring on public roads within the neighborhood. No law, state or HOA prohibited honking a horn during normal hours. And then came the final line. My client is simply ensuring board members are aware the vehicle has been moved, since no surveillance or monitoring systems are in place to verify compliance. No threats, no anger. Just a quiet little dagger of logic. The message was clear. If you're going to write rules you can't enforce, we'll make sure you feel the consequences, legally and publicly. From that point on, something shifted. The lawyer for the HOA, who had been silent in previous meetings, started showing signs of discomfort. He wasn't smiling. He asked fewer questions. His tone changed. Not hostile, but cautious. Because deep down I think he knew what the board wouldn't admit. They were losing. Not because we were breaking rules, but because we were following them too well. We gave them exactly what they asked for. And we made sure everyone could see it. And the more we stayed calm, legal and deliberate, the more foolish the board began to look. It wasn't a loud victory, not yet, but the cracks were showing. and something told me they were getting ready to fold. Let's get one thing straight. An HOA cannot enforce a rule it can't prove, and that's exactly what happened here. They passed a new regulation requiring vehicles to be moved every 24 hours, but they never installed surveillance, never assigned anyone to log vehicle positions, never documented anything. So when they sent us that fine, my brother-in-law asked a simple, devastating question: where's the proof? And they had none, because no matter how official a letter looks, if it isn't backed by documentation, it doesn't hold up. Let me break this down in plain English. Private property, unlimited power. Yes, HOAs manage the community, but they are not the police. They can't trespass, touch your property, or accuse you of a violation without evidence. Touching a covered car to check a plate, that could be seen as tampering or even trespassing, depending on your state. If it's your car in a valid spot, legally registered, they have no right to touch it. Rules must be enforceable and applied fairly. When an HOA creates a new rule, it must be approved according to governing documents, apply to all homeowners equally, be enforceable with reasonable documentation. What happened here was a textbook example of selective enforcement. One household was targeted while others were ignored. That opens the door to a legal challenge. HOAs that apply rules inconsistently or cannot prove violations are vulnerable to claims of discrimination, harassment, or bad faith governance. Use their own rule. Against them, we never broke their rule. We followed it to the letter and then made it impossible for them to argue otherwise. That's the key. If you're being unfairly targeted, stay calm. Stay within the rules, but push back with precision. Don't argue emotionally. Ask questions like, where is the written documentation of this violation? Who witnessed this and when? How does this apply to other homeowners? And if they can't answer, they're bluffing. Public visibility can be a weapon. Driving past the board members' homes and honking. Perfectly legal. It was on public roads. No noise ordinances were violated. And it forced them to feel the weight of their own decision every single day. HOAs count on quiet compliance. When you make enforcement public, without being aggressive or illegal, it puts pressure back where it belongs, on the people abusing their power. When you push back legally, things change. We didn't threaten lawsuits. We didn't go nuclear. We sent a letter with logic from a lawyer. The moment they realized we knew the rules and were willing to challenge theirs, they started backing off. So remember, know your rights, follow the rules better than they do, and when they push back the smart way, because sometimes the law doesn't shout. It just quietly wins. It took about 10 days of honking. Every evening, like clockwork, my brother-in-law drove that car past every board member's house, not speeding, not blasting music, just a single honk at each stop. A polite, legal reminder that the vehicle had in fact been moved, and every day we kept getting letters. Not violation notices this time, and just vague warnings. Please refrain from disturbing other residents. Please respect community quiet hours. Please avoid conduct that may be seen as retaliatory. No mention of the rule anymore, no more fines, no enforcement, just begging. Eventually a new letter arrived, different tone entirely. The board had decided to waive the fine issued against my brother-in-law. No reason given, no apology, just that the fee had been reviewed and would no longer be pursued. That could have been the end, but he wasn't done. He wrote back, I appreciate the fee being waived. However, if the 24-hour rule remains on the books and can be enforced at any time, we will continue the nightly drive as a courtesy to ensure board members are updated on our compliance. There was no anger in his voice. No sarcasm, just logic, because, here's the thing, it wasn't just about my car anymore, it was about the principle. If they could write a rule just to target one person, they could do it again, to anyone, and we weren't going to let that stand. A few days later, they caved. The board issued a short update in the next community newsletter. After careful review, the 24-hour vehicle movement policy is being repealed, effective immediately. We appreciate all residents' commitment to maintaining community standards. That was it. No fanfare, no explanation. Just buried between landscaping reminders and a reminder about pool hours. But we knew what it meant. They had created a rule to punish us. We followed it better than they ever expected. And in doing so, we exposed just how weak and unjust that rule really was. They couldn't produce proof. They couldn't defend their actions. They couldn't handle the quiet legal pressure. So they folded. And after that, we never got another letter. No one walked behind our unit again. No one touched the car cover. No one just happened to pass by anymore. We weren't exactly welcome at HOA meetings, but we didn't need to be, because the message had been sent, not just to the board, but to everyone watching. If you're going to write rules, they better apply to everyone. If you're going to enforce them, you better have proof. And if you try to target just one person, don't be surprised when they fight back harder, smarter, and louder than you expected. If you've ever felt like your HOA was watching your every move, you're not alone. This story wasn't just about a parked car. It was about control, about power, and about what happens when a group of people with rules, but no real oversight, decides to target someone because they think they can. That's the reality a lot of homeowners live with. But here's what I learned, and what you need to know if you're facing the same kind of nonsense. First, HOA rules must be enforceable and fair. They can't just write a rule and apply it to you and no one else. Selective enforcement is one of the fastest ways for an HOA to get themselves into legal trouble. If they create a rule, it has to be voted in, properly applied to every resident, equally supported with real documentation if they can't prove. You broke it. They can't fine you for it. Second, don't accept a violation without asking for proof. When my brother-in-law asked for video or logs to show that the vehicle hadn't moved, the board had nothing. They couldn't produce a single piece of evidence. So the next time you get a violation letter, respond in writing and ask, how was the violation documented? Who witnessed it? When and where did it occur? Was it applied to other homeowners? The burden of proof is on them, not you. Third, stay calm. Stay legal, but stay visible. We didn't scream. We didn't threaten lawsuits. We followed the rules and made sure the board knew it every day. And we did it in a way they couldn't ignore, driving the car, honking once, on a public road, legal, visible, inevitable. They couldn't stop us without admitting their rule had no teeth. Sometimes, the best way to push back isn't to argue, it's to comply so precisely that the rule collapses under its own weight. Fourth, don't let them pressure you into silence. A lot of people get HOA letters and fold. They pay the fine, move the object, apologize, even when they did nothing wrong. Why? Because the letters look official, the tone feels threatening, and the board counts on you not knowing your rights. But if you stand your ground, calmly, respectfully, and legally, you'll be surprised how quickly things change. Fifth, know when to push back and how. We never crossed the line, but we walked right up to it and made sure they knew we were watching too. And when they realized we weren't going to be intimidated, they backed down, because in the end, HOA power only works when it's unchallenged. So here's what I want you to remember. You don't have to yell, you don't have to fight dirty. You don't even need to break the rules, you just need to know them and use them better than the people trying to control you. You never really notice how loud silence can be until you've earned it. After the rule was repealed, the letters stopped. The stares stopped. The tension that once filled the air on our evening walks was just gone. I still drove the car, sometimes, not to prove a point anymore, as just to keep the battery alive. But even then, there was a difference. No more glares, no more sudden new policies, no more attempts to control something that was never theirs to begin with. The HOA didn't apologize. They didn't admit they were wrong. They just stopped. And honestly, that was enough. Because sometimes victory doesn't look like a speech or a courtroom showdown. Sometimes it's a quiet neighborhood again, a parking lot no one's inspecting, a set of rules that no longer punish one person just for existing. Sometimes the win is in the peace you reclaim, after you've proven that you won't be pushed. I still think about how ridiculous it all was. All the effort, the rules, the monitoring, just to try and force a parked car to disappear. But more than that, I think about the lesson in it, because there's always going to be someone on a power trip, someone who thinks their clipboard gives them the right to decide how everyone else should live, someone who doesn't enforce rules, they weaponize them. And if you stay quiet, if you fold, if you let them get away with it, they'll keep going. But the moment you hold up a mirror, the moment you calmly, logically, and legally say, no, you don't get to do this, that's when things start to shift. Not because you yelled, not because you threatened, but because you made them realize you're not afraid to stand your ground, not in their meetings, not in their fake rules, not in their little wars over where your bumper happens to sit. You're just a neighbor, one who knows your rights and knows how to use them. Never underestimate the power of one calm voice and one well-parked car. If this happened to you, what would you have done? Say it in the comments. And if you've ever been targeted by your HOA, you're not alone.